Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 15th, 2013 meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority. First of all, I will ask all of you who have your cell phones, smartphones out there to put them on vibrate or silence, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Joe Brzezinski.
Here.
Councilmember Marsha Jensen. Here. Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Vice Mayor Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. Again, as I tend to say, and many of you have already heard, we have a tradition in our council chambers for our council meetings where we have a special student come up and help us lead the flag salute. This evening, that student is Maggie Callow, and I'm going to ask Maggie to come up here while I talk about her. This is Maggie. She's a fifth grader at Alta Vista Elementary School. She is a member of the Alta Vista Student Council and is the fifth grade secretary. Her favorite subject in school is math. She is an avid reader, and it is impossible to keep enough books around for her, and I can tell her family agrees over there. She recently participated with the Student Council in spearheading the school-wide Pennies for Patients drive. They collected over $3,000. She plays on the West Valley United Girls competitive soccer team and usually plays attacking mid or striker. Maggie also plays recreational basketball through the Los Gatos Rec Department. In basketball, she enjoys playing point guard most. She takes piano lessons and recently completed level 2 in the Certificate of Merit program. And we always like to save the best for last. She holds her soccer team juggling record and can juggle the ball 317 times without dropping or touching it. Let's give her a round of applause. Now, if you would all please join us, stand and join us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag for the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What gives you a gift here? There you go. Another round of applause. All right, now if you intend to speak tonight, either on something on the agenda or not on the agenda, if you please fill out one of these speaker cards and hand it to the clerk over here to my left. Let's see, do we have a closed session report?
Thank you. The council met in closed session as duly noticed on the agenda, and they took no action, and there's nothing to report out this evening.
Thank you. Council matters. Anybody want to? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Since our last meeting, I attended 3 meetings on behalf of the council. One was for the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority, one was for the Santa Clara Valley Water Commission, and one was for the West Valley Sanitation District. And we discussed lots of different things during these meetings. Some included contract negotiations, some included groundwater recharge, and some included increased fees. That was particularly the Sanitation District. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the last week or so, a couple of meetings I have attended on our behalf. One is the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. Last Thursday, we met and had Senator Jerry Hill and Assemblyman Rich Gordon in attendance from Sacramento, and the topics were the RENA numbers and RDA. We have been involved in the search for a new general manager for the Valley Transportation Authority. That search has commenced this week with outreach to various interest groups to get characteristics of a new manager. The current manager will be retiring at the end of this year, and so that's our goal, is to have a new manager in place by October, actually, of this year.
Thank you. All right, and then in the past, since the last council meeting, along with Mr. Brzezinski, we had a general plan committee meeting. At that general plan committee meeting, we were discussing what we call AHOS, or the overlay zones, and the committee tentatively selected 5 sites for the overlay zone, and we have asked staff, consistent with council's direction, we have now asked staff to have neighborhood meetings at those 5 sites so that we can get additional information before we go forward. Manager matters.
Mayor, members of the council, a few items. First, on tonight's agenda, we've given you desk items on consent calendar items. 1, the minutes for the West Valley Clean Water Program, and item 6, the North Side parking lot improvements. There was also a desk item provided to you and to the public out in the lobby for item number 7 regarding retail firearm sales. And I would also like to note for the record that every member of the council received roughly a dozen public emails that were not made available to staff till after the 3 p.m. desk item publishing. So by just referencing those now, those become part of the public record that you each did receive those letters, and I have them available here. Now, moving off tonight's agenda, as the council will recall, last meeting you celebrated Los Gatos Beautiful Month, and the library is participating that with its program this Thursday at 4 p.m. in the library for youth regarding the wild things, where the wild things are. And at least for that day, we welcome them to the library. And then we also have a big celebration this Saturday, and it's my honor to introduce Executive Fellow in the Manager's Office, Shalane Hammock, who will do tonight's Did You Know? Shalane?
Thank you, Greg. Did you know that this Saturday is the Pageant Grounds Dedication and Arbor Day celebration? It's at 11 a.m. and goes to 12:30 p.m. A little bit about Pageant Grounds. It's not only the oldest park, but it's the newest park in Los Gatos, as it was recently renovated. It has a lot of historical significance to it, and that includes it was the site of many summer pageants in the early 1900s. There'll be a lot of great activities there, including music from the Peninsula Scottish Fiddlers, an original poem, face painting, bubbles, a free reusable bag, and a gourmet popcorn. In addition to these activities, it'll be an Arbor Day celebration too, where we'll be planting 2 trees. We'll have local kids from the community planting those. And it is the 33rd year that Los Gatos is recognized as Tree City, USA. If you have any questions, you can contact me at the phone number or shammock@losgatoscal.gov.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, anything further?
That concludes staff report.
Thank you very much. All right, we are now on the consent calendar portion of our agenda. We do have 6 items on the consent calendar, and as Mr. Larson noted, we have desk items on consent calendar items 1 and 6. Is there anybody from the council that wishes to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, I do not have a card indicating that anyone from the public wishes to pull an item, but does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent calendar who is in the audience? Seeing no one, I will then turn to the council for a motion. Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent calendar inclusive of the desk items.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Leonardis, seconded by Mr. Przinski. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we have verbal communications next on our agenda, and this is the opportunity for anyone wishing to speak on something not on our agenda to come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. I do ask that you submit to us a card, and right now I have a card from one individual who wishes to speak on verbal communications, and that is Ann Robinson.
Ann Robinson, 201 Charter Oak Circle. First, I'd like to acknowledge the terrorist attack in Boston today. A prayer of love and healing goes out to the victims and their families and friends. I feel like their sacrifice today is the reason I have the ability to stand here and speak my concerns in a democratic forum. Terrorism is a new war, and the citizens are the new soldiers. Tonight, I'm here to talk about the Albright Project. I wanted to submit a new photo of the crane that was taken yesterday. The cherry picker on the east side of building number 4 was moved to the southeast corner. Here is the picture of the cherry picker in relation to Charter Oaks. Both the trees on the right and left side of the cherry picker are deciduous. Building number 4 sits on a 20-foot hill, making it 85 feet above Charter Oaks. If you cannot determine the mass and density, but this building will significantly impact Charter Oaks visually, both day and night. And I will leave this picture with you. Thank you.
Before you leave, first of all, could you please turn it? And then, again, this will be my question. Could you just please explain, you were talking verbally, the picture wasn't up. Could you please tell us in relation to the picture?
Okay, so this is just behind a building at Charter Oaks, and it just shows the crane. It's at the southeast end of building number 4, and the tree on the left and the tree on the right are deciduous trees, so obviously in the winter it'll be a little different viewpoint. But that is basically just to show the impact of that. There will be a building that will be 85 feet above. Our buildings are 25 feet max, and it will be on a 20-foot hill, which will be a 65-foot building on a 20-foot hill, which will be 85 feet above us. So that's it. I mean, I just wanted to show this picture I took yesterday from Charter Oaks Circle. So this was taken from the circle just to show the impact.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the council on verbal communications, items not on our agenda? And by the way, thank you, Ms. Robinson, for sharing your thoughts about the events of today. All right, I have no cards on verbal communications, any further cards. So we now are on public hearings. And again, if you want to speak on a public hearing, please submit a card. A lot of you already have, and I appreciate that. Agenda item 7, and I will ask the members in the audience, especially those who intend to speak, on bearing with me while I read through what this agenda item is about. This agenda item deals with the adoption of an urgency ordinance extending the interim ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the establishment of commercial operations engaged in the sale of retail firearms, ammunition, and/or destructive devices. To B, accept a written report on the measures taken to date to alleviate the conditions that led to the adoption of an urgency interim ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the establishment of commercial operations engaged in the sale of retail firearms, ammunition, and/or destructive devices. Ms. Propp will be making the staff report for us. And again, those of you who intend to address us, we have heard a lot of testimony over the past year on issues related to guns, and I will ask that At this meeting, we focus in on the issues before us, as will be explained and expanded upon by Ms. Prop.
Thank you, Mayor and council members of the public. There is a desk item, as the manager mentioned, on this item that is primarily incorporating additional public comments that staff received once the staff report was released on Friday. As the mayor mentioned, this agenda item tonight is for council's consideration whether to extend the temporary moratorium that restricts new firearms dealers in the town of Los Gatos. The proposed ordinance, urgency ordinance, is attached to the staff report as attachment 2, and it includes proposed findings to support an extension. The extension, if approved, would be for a period of up to 10 months plus 15 days as set forth in state law. At any time, however, during this period, if council adopts any regulations regarding firearms dealers, then the moratorium can be rescinded prior to its expiration. Desk item 2 sets forth the measures that the town has taken since adopting the temporary moratorium on March 4th, and the steps town still needs to take during the extension prior to adopting regulations. One of the proposals in the desk item, if it meets with council's schedule, is to return with proposed regulations before the summer break, and that would be in June. We're available for questions if you have any.
All right, and before we turn to Ms. Prop with any questions we may have, the desk item which we have before us also indicates that it is my intent as mayor to establish an ad hoc committee of 2 council members to work on the development of this ordinance, specifically to identify the issues, to narrow them down if possible, and then to move this process forward as reasonably and expeditiously as possible. That ad hoc committee has not yet been established, but it will be within this week. So that being said, any questions of staff? All right, no questions. Then I will begin with our testimony, and the first person I have here is Shannon Susik.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Shannon Susik, 16407 Shady View Lane. Our prayers go to Boston tonight. We gather in chambers again regarding the operation of what has now become an armory in our town. We are sure no one sitting on the dais takes pride in the weapons that Templar is manufacturing or shipping across the nation from Los Gatos. But you can take pride in enacting the 45-day moratorium so that they can't expand their licensing at present to add incendiary devices. Despite this distaste and the repetitive cries from Templar and the NRA, the core issue is land use and zoning. And despite insistence by town staff and some council, there was something that could have been done. This has been addressed in these chambers already with case and model law letters and emails. I have spoken to many issues and conflicts, but tonight, again, I represent over 2,000 residents and community members that are appalled at the decision-making process involving Templar Sports. A formal complaint was filed on April 4th regarding the current zoning violations, including classes, parking, building, and site. We have 3 questions now. One is, what is being done regarding these zoning violations? Tonight's meeting should be about a conditional use permit for Templar Sports if all were equal in this town. Why was Templar given favorable treatment during the application process and now, when, for example, the town moved to close Keith Hall and Guitars and require a conditional use permit for only 1 infraction after 1 anonymous complaint? The staff and council have received hundreds of written and verbal complaints regarding parking, zoning, health and safety issues, and no conditional use permit was issued, no threat of Templar closing. Please don't say that there was no policy in place regarding the concerts given at Keith Holland Guitars, because there was no policy in place for selling and manufacturing weapons or related instructional classes, all in a building that violates current LM zoning before and after the minor building modifications. Why is it that after a closed session performance review on March 25th, the town manager is still present at these meetings and we're proposing an extension, more matrices and presentations when he and the staff have been given time and all the ordinance language and model law? We request an immediate investigation into the current zoning violations, and until that investigation is complete and Templar's activities and building is brought to code or overseen by a conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Avi Zakai, and after Mr. Zakai, Lainey Richardson.
I understand and I appreciate the pressure that you guys have to endure. But as an elected official, I would expect you and to abide by the law and common sense. For instance, vehicles cause 4 times as many fatalities as guns, like over 40,000 versus over 10,000, and a much larger number of bodily injuries. Vehicles are also used as destructive devices, such as running people off sidewalks into malls, drive-by shootings, and car bombs. Whole families get wiped out in accidents, as we happened recently, and so forth. In light of that, would the city of Los Gatos consider to restrict and control private vehicle ownership or use? Why not have everyone here use taxis and minibuses driven by professional drivers? Using the same logic as used against Templar Sports, why not shut down the high-end car dealerships in town, given the rate of 400% higher than gun violence? How can we glorify and support the sale of cars that do better than 4 times the speed limit or over 200 miles an hour? I know that Los Gatos wouldn't do it because fortunately we live in the United States of America, and we just had the Pledge of Allegiance that tells us that we cannot discriminate. And now, if private cars that I only use for our convenience, and we wouldn't do it, guns are used for sports and for self-defense, which is basic and fundamental right, which is supported by the law and by our constitution. In light of that, I think that the city needs to stand its ground and fight hypocrisy and discrimination versus to succumb to it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Lainey Richardson, followed by, can't read the first name, but last name is Rawlings.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Lainey Richardson. My husband and I own a home on Wilder Avenue and have lived in Los Gatos and paid taxes in town for over 30 years. I want to address the frustration I feel when people from out of town come to these meetings and try to tell us what stores we should allow and what ordinances we should or shouldn't adopt in our town. I cannot imagine going to some other town's meetings and voicing my opinion as to what that town should or shouldn't do. I'm especially frustrated with the fact that Templar Armaments has offered their supporters discounts at their store for attending and speaking at these meetings. Please take this flyer printed off the Calguns website as proof of Templar's offer.
Thank you. Looks like Charles Rawlings, followed by Cynthia Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. When I spoke here at this podium 2 months ago, I spoke with grave concern about the rising tide of violence. Since that time, we have had a district attorney and his wife murdered. We have had sheriffs in states murdered. We have had any number of shootings involving high magazine weapons, and tonight we have the terrible violence of Boston. I simply want to urge the council to pursue with all vigor and diligence the regulation and narrowing of the ability of anyone to increase the manufacture or distribution of firearms here in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Schneider and then Bob McCarthy.
Good evening, Mayor Spector and Council. I'm Cindy Schneider, and I've been a Los Gatos resident for 27 years. From the first day, some of us stood in protest at 611 University Avenue, Templar Armaments. Until tonight, we have been inundated with questions from friends, family, neighbors, and strangers. They range from, how could this happen? Who are the owners? To, why didn't we hear about this? Today, April 15th, is unfortunately a momentous day for all of us, tax day. Taxes are due. And although many of us pay taxes that support the salaries of staff and employees for our town every day with sales and property taxes, we have a request for the staff and for the town council that relate to a question we have heard over and over again. The question is, why is it that our tax dollars pay the salary of a Los Gatos policeman who is sworn by oath to protect the citizens of this town and who is allowed to sell and profit from sale of weapons that could endanger the same citizens and community members? Although it would seem obvious, since we have a police chief that endorsed the opening of this store and a police officer that is an owner, we request that any future ordinance language ban the outside employment of current or former law enforcement officers in any capacity in the town of Los Gatos. There are too many conflicts regarding oversight, profits, endorsements, salary, and overtime that your constituents and those on the outside find unethical and disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob McCarthy and then Mary Ellen Kashub.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Bob McCartney. I live in Los Gatos. And I greatly appreciate the council's willingness to expedite the adoption of regulatory language to cover such retail outlets as Templar Sports. What I hope can happen is that these proposed regulations can be available for people to see and comment upon before they're placed on the agenda for adoption, so that we can have some opportunity to reflect and discuss the implications, because there are a number of them that are unique to our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ellen Kashub and then Dale Bracey.
Thank you, Mayor Spector and the council. I'm going to keep my remarks really brief tonight and just on really one issue, though I have a lot to say about all of it. But I'd like to know and have you discuss why propose a 10-month extension to the current moratorium when the council, town manager, town attorney have all been given and served with outstanding regulation and ordinances done in other California communities, offered from the San Francisco Center for Law, which has offered many counsel on setting up these ordinances. Why put it off? Why not just get to it and do it? It's not that complicated. And I don't know why the town manager would want to put it off any further. And I would like to encourage the council to discuss that aspect and get to the root of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale Bracey and then Jess Gee, or Guy.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, my name is Dale Bracey. I live for the last 7 years at 117 Fancher Court, Los Gatos. I certainly support the urgency ordinance. And like the previous speaker, questioning why is it taking this long to get it going and still not done? It's a question to me of character and of how you want to be known. A couple of years ago, I took my granddaughters to the small Missouri town where I grew up on the Mississippi River. They were fascinated by the cotton, the steamboats are still in the river, the barge traffic. But what struck them most of all was right in the heart of the town, the most prominent store that stood out was with a big sign, guns, bait, and ammo. Afterwards, they said, Grandpa, I thought you grew up in the backwater, but really, to see what the setting really was, Grandpa, we really feel sorry for you, that you had to grow up in that kind of character and that kind of situation, where that's what's the most prominent thing in town. It's a question of how we want Los Gatos to be known. I moved here 7 years ago because I thought it was quite different. A city of culture, a city that valued families and good neighbor and process for hearing one another and not sweeping things under the rug. So my question is, what is the character that you want to keep fostering and growing in Los Gatos? That of a hick town that's known as maybe the center for buying weapons of mass destruction and armaments in Santa Clara County?
Jess Guy, followed by Robert Shackelford.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Council. At the last Town Council meeting we had, there was discussion, quite a bit of discussion on whether or not the emergency moratorium should pass. I don't think anyone in this room thought it wasn't going to pass unanimously. It did, unanimously. We're now looking at a request from the town manager to extend the emergency moratorium for 10 more months. I guess that means this emergency is ongoing for another 10 months. I don't know, I can't identify that very well. I also assume the word temporary doesn't have a lot of meaning. I've reviewed the ordinance. There are many conclusory statements in there that are basically without facts. I'm not going to review them because I've submitted a letter to the council about that. I would make a couple of requests, and I do agree with the one gentleman who said it'd be nice if proposed ordinances could somehow be brought out to the public. If you're going to propose some ordinances prior to any evening voting, I think it'd be a great idea to get some input from people who are at least aware of what current federal and state laws are, so you're not duplicating them. You don't have an issue with preemption. Right now, there are about 50 pending bills in the California State Legislature relative to firearms and ammunition. You don't need to duplicate those. You don't need to run into preemption problems with those. I would also ask the town manager, attorney, council to avoid falling into a trap of using so-called model laws and ordinances crafted by anyone, especially an organization, whose sole goal is to eliminate private possession of firearms by citizens of the United States. You had one person speak earlier about out-of-towners, and then you had another person speaking about, let's use the out-of-towners to use their laws. Well, you can't have it both ways. And I do agree with the fact that some of the material that may be proposed by the town council as ordinances should be Los Gatos directed. And I think that the review process within the town by the public is important. It's very important. Is this continuation of the moratorium is going to pass? It's going to pass unanimously. I bet on that. But if we can bring the community together, and right now they're kind of split, and that's not a good thing. If we could bring the community together, whatever comes out of this would be good for everybody in Los Gatos. And I think it would help us heal some wounds that maybe have been opened in this case, and I'd like to have that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Shackelford and then Scott.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me here again. Yes, I do agree. It would be nice to view proposed ordinances before they're put on the agenda for any kind of adoption. My concern would be to see whether the ordinances that are proposed focus on subject matter or on particulars. Particulars like so many people per square feet, occupancy, a fire extinguisher by each doorway where an emergency exit is located. How much percentage of square foot can be used to store something that's flammable or explosive in nature, as opposed to focusing on subject matter such as firearms, tattoos, alcohols, and so on. Because when you go one way, you're starting to talk about bans. When you go the other, you're focusing really on health and safety, and that I'm okay with. This is my third time here, and I keep hearing this statement over and over about out-of-towners coming in and voicing their opinion. I would like the folks protesting Templar Spokes to understand that those very same folks are the ones who actually invited me here. Now, I know some of them may be shaking their head like, hey, we don't know this guy, we never met him, we didn't ask him to come here. Well, look at it from a different way. When you attack someone's fundamental basic rights under a nation founded on the basis of liberty, you are sending out an invitation to others to come to their defense. Our basic fundamental rights have no boundaries to them. They extend across this nation in its entirety. When people started to attack Templar Spokes, I considered myself to be invited here. Never mind that I voluntarily offered to not speak if one person would stand up and say, Mr. Shackelford, please do not speak, you're not from the town of Los Gatos. No one took me up on that offer. I'd like everybody to remember that. I'd like to say one last time, I hope the council focuses on health and safety in the proposed ordinances rather than subject matter, and just recognize the right of anyone to establish a legitimate business and provide jobs for anyone who's interested in working in that business. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, and then Dave Walker.
Mayor Spector, members of the council, I've lived in Los Gatos for 9 years. A few days after you passed the first urgency ordinance on this topic, I mentioned the ordinance to a gentleman who works part-time at the office of one of my clients. He's in his late 60s, and he grew up in the Central Valley. He told me that when he was 10 years old, he traded a broken radio that he owned for a friend's broken rifle. He took the broken rifle to a local gunsmith by himself. He was not with his parents. The gunsmith diagnosed the problem as a broken firing pin. The gunsmith then spent the next hour fabricating a new firing pin for the rifle. The boy asked the gunsmith how much he owed for the firing pin. The gunsmith looked at the boy for a minute, and then he said, "Do you have $1 on you, son?" The boy paid the gunsmith $1, and the gunsmith handed him back the rifle. Fast forward 1 year, the boy is now 11 years old. He was riding around town on his bicycle with the rifle attached to the bicycle, and of course, the rifle was completely visible. A police officer asked the 11-year-old boy to stop. The boy got off his bike. The policeman asked him for his rifle. The officer took the rifle and checked to see if it was loaded. It wasn't loaded. The officer returned the rifle to the boy, and the officer thanked the 11-year-old boy for carrying the rifle in a safe manner. Mayor Spector, members of the council, do you really think that the residents of Los Gatos and the surrounding communities are less responsible and less law-abiding than the residents of that Central Valley community back in the 1950s? I sincerely hope that you do not think that the parents in this room are somehow less responsible than the parents were back in the 1950s. I read the text of this extension of the so-called urgency ordinance. After subtracting out all those whereas clauses that you threw in there in an attempt to justify the ordinance, the real reason you want to pass this ordinance is very clear, and it ain't for land use regulations. Please vote no on extending this urgency ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Walker, and then John Riley.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I appreciate being here tonight, second time being here. I'm going to say something a little bit different. You know, everybody's talking about the emergency measure and like just be pressed on and move forward. What I would like to see is that I'm actually glad you're taking your time to look at these issues. And the reason being, the last time I spoke here, I sat, and as I'm hearing tonight, even again, things aren't really quite true. There was one of the things read into the record The lady that read it from this podium handed over to here, and it was put into the record. I think you, Madam Mayor, ordered to be put in the record that something like 85 or 87% of the suicides in this county were with firearms. My background, a little over 21 years in law enforcement, where I go out to suicides, didn't jive up really with my experience from what I recollected. So I did two things. I went back through my old call logs, and I found there's about a 50-50 mix between suicides with guns, suicide with other means. The other thing I did is I went to the coroner's office and talked to somebody that I'd seen in the field a number of times who happens to be tracking this. For 2012, in the county of Santa Clara, there were 48 deaths suicidal by hanging, 42 deaths by gun. 12 cases have not yet been decided. This is as of last month. They'll put a cause of death, on that at some later time. And so I thought, whoever read this into your record and was, accepted as fact, not true. And so I'm urging you that when you take your time, please take your time. I'm glad to see that you are taking your time, because this is kind of maybe a pivotal time for the city of Los Gatos, the town of Los Gatos. Look at what you're doing. Take your time, do your research, do your own research. Don't take my word, and don't take the word for others. Something I've heard too is that it's like guns are the evil, that the more guns you have, the more violence you have. Not necessarily true. Kennesaw, Georgia, it was made mandatory. Their city council passed a law that said that every head of household had to own a gun, and that gun had to have ammunition. Sounds counterintuitive to what we're talking about here tonight. Their crime rate was predicted to skyrocket with all the weapons now brought into the community. It instead dropped by 89%. Was it a fluke? No. For the next 16 years, it stayed at that low level and did not come up. So I urge you, take your time, look at what you're doing. I'm glad. I commend you for taking the time to do so and giving this proper attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Riley, and then something Schiff.
Possible to use this overhead? Is that more visual person? I just want to direct the discussion to two issues of concern. What is shown here is the HK-23E, which is a machine gun sold by Templar Sports. And I was concerned about it because it's a belt-fed machine gun, and there's 3 other items that are also belt-fed guns that are allow. This one can fire 1,000 bullets without jamming. So it's been tested, and I was surprised to see that this is on the website. And then I talked to one of the officers, and he was considered to send me back information after he talked to the ATF. And the only reason that it's allowed to be sold is that it's missing the pistol grip, and the pistol grip makes it sellable over their sales website. So that Templar Sports has this on their shop area. There's these things go through gun website internet sales, and then these internet sales should go to a FFL person to receive it and then distribute it to another person. Another thing of concern, though, is that Templar sells the M4 carbine rifle, which was the same rifle that was used in the Sandy Hook shooting, which is easy with the bullet button to change out the magazines very quickly. So this is sold, and if it's made by Zero Forge, and if it's tooled, it's considered 100% lower receiver. But if it's not tooled, it's 80%. And if it's 80%, as according to ATF, it could be shipped anywhere in the country without regulations. And there's a high demand for this item. This is the key item of their sales. And so I think in future moratoriums. We want to look at the internet sales of what's being sold through any gun store, and especially at Templar Sports. So thank you.
Thank you. Maybe it's Eric Schiff and then Henry Fee.
Yeah, Eric Schiff, 227 Jones Road. Sorry for the bad handwriting. I've lived in Los Gatos since '95. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I believe we need transparency in our processes, in both fairness and to the overall Los Gatos community, but also to businesses such as Templar Sports in this case. Transparency, I think, is even more essential when, in this case, a member of the Los Gatos Police Department is in the Templar Sports management team, and when the subject is as contentious as this one clearly is, and I think that could have been, anticipated earlier in the process, excuse me. This obviously didn't happen in this case. I think it's clear a gun store is different from other retail stores by virtue of the products sold. So relative to the specific issue in question tonight, I suggest review of the process continues in this case, corrective actions to increase transparency. I support a moratorium on further gun stores and also a narrowing the scope of gun sales in town to preclude large magazine weapons or other potentially dangerous items which seem to have no legitimate hunting use. Also, I would suggest, as someone has mentioned before, allowing Templar Sports Management to continue an active Los Gatos Police Department duties seems to be a apparent conflict of interest, which we should avoid. Thank you.
Thank you. Henry Fee and Deborah Weinstein.
Good evening. We've heard a lot about our constitutional guarantees. Very few people have quoted the Supreme Court justices when they were reviewing the last appellate court decision about gun control in Washington, D.C. Clearly aware of the Second Amendment, they cautioned the gun people that the Second Amendment does not guarantee that any weapon can be carried by any person in any location at any time. There needs to be some narrowing down of this right. This isn't a carte blanche. And I'm surprised that there's concern about a 10-month moratorium. I've been around guns all my life, and I'm learning stuff every day the last couple months. I can't imagine that you people sitting up there were informed enough to consider a unmitigated, unconditional permit to a company selling weapons that, for all intents and purposes, are used to kill as many people as quickly as possible. I think all of us, I think you guys and us need an opportunity to educate ourselves about what we've let into our community. And the fact that technology is moving so quickly, I wonder how many of you know about a 3D printer that can load the supply side with iron filings and generate a machine gun. So you buy a 3D printer, you bring it in your basement, and then you put the little smart chip in and you generate machine guns. Or maybe Templar sells the chip and somebody else sells the 3D, and all the basements in town are generating machine guns. That's why this needs to be not only a temporary moratorium, but there needs to be a conditional permit that is reviewed every 2 or 3 years as the technology in firearms evolve, as the citizens become more sophisticated about ways that we can decrease the number of serial killings, never eliminating them. No one's saying that. Now, I wonder sometimes if the staff here and the council is a little insulated from how the general public feels in Los Gatos. The fact that the staff could let this issue go through without suggesting to the council that there be public hearings, even though he wasn't legally mandated to do that, implies a certain insulation from what goes on in the general community. I would hope that we would soon have a draft of the ordinances that the staff is recommending to the council. I would hope the draft would include some of the 15 items that we have suggested, that we have researched, that we have quoted the models, that we have quoted the laws, and we have cited the laws when these ordinances went to the appellate courts. And I would most sincerely hope that the ad hoc committee appointed by the mayor includes a couple citizens in addition to council members. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deborah Weinstein. That's my last card.
Four months ago, on December 10th, I spoke regarding my concerns over a new firearm retailer that was allowed to open without any community input. And then 4 days later, the worst possible happened in a town, the look and feel of Los Gatos, Sandy Hook. As a community, we searched on how to move forward. A few weeks later, Templar opened its doors in late December. After being open for less than 10 days, the owner was quoted saying he was attempting to expand. Those expansion items mentioned securing a level 10 federal firearms license. As far as I understand, he has never refuted that statement. As you may recall, a level 10 firearms permit includes manufacturing of destructive devices. And today, here we are once again, after the explosions in Boston. I am outraged that this is possible in our town. Please extend the moratorium, and please adopt a plan that allows for appropriate community input. That ordinance language will regulate the sales and manufacture of firearms, ammunition, and explosives. There is nothing more important than this. Please make this the town's top priority. We have all sat through over 15 hours of town council meetings. We have all worked tirelessly to get almost 2,000 signatures from the Los Gatos community to support these regulations. We have worked for hours to compile legal ordinance language. In the meantime, our wise neighbor Campbell has the following ordinance applied to existing businesses. A person engaged in the business of selling, leasing, or otherwise transferring any firearm component, or ammunition on the effective date of this chapter shall, within 90 days of this effective date, comply with this chapter. Campbell Ordinance number 2150. Los Gatos should adopt the same ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards. Anyone wishing to speak on this agenda item? Noting for the record that no one is coming forward, I will now close the public testimony portion of our hearing and look to the council for its input, motion. Ms. Jensen.
Madam Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion if that's appropriate. And my motion would be that this council make the findings that are contained in the proposed ordinance in front of us that we received as attachment 1 to our staff report.
Ms. Jensen, I don't want to step on your lines here.
Okay.
But I'm looking at the direction that I'm supposed to take.
Okay.
And I'll check with staff. Before we go any further, I'm going to direct the clerk administrator to read the title of the urgency ordinance. There will be no motion required here.
An urgency ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos extending the interim temporary moratorium on the establishment of commercial operations engaged in the sale of firearms, ammunition, and/or destructive devices within the Town of Los Gatos and declaring the urgency thereof.
Ms. Jensen, I'll go back to you, and I am looking at the process of going through this motion.
So I'm looking at our staff report A, recommendation, and B, accept written report. So I was going to the ordinance first. If you want me to go to accept the written report, which is item number 2, and that written report is the report that we received from our attorney, which outlines, according to California Government Code Section 65858C, D, the requirement that the town publish a document 10 days prior to any hearing indicating what measures have been taken to alleviate the conditions that were identified on March 4th in our first urgency ordinance, which prompted us to pass that urgency ordinance. So my motion would incorporate those items that are contained there, which include the fact that the staff has been researching various ordinances that we could put into place, engaging in community outreach. I then would include in my motion that we adopt the proposed ordinance, the title of which has just been read by Ms. Zakaria, to extend the urgency ordinance for a period of 10 months, I think, and 15 days, based upon the findings that are contained in that ordinance, which include those that were identified when we originally adopted the ordinance on March 4th, including threats, if you will, to public health, safety, and welfare in Los Gatos, including vandalism at the store, personal threats that were made against both opponents of the shop and an owner of the shop, vandalism and litter that's occurred at the store. In addition, there has been an incident where the shop has sold a weapon to a person that was not supposed to have one. That resulted in that weapon being returned. So the proximity of the store to parks and schools, all of those remain before us. The town is working to adopt regulations. And as Mr. Guy pointed out, there is a plethora of various regulations being considered on both state and national level that Los Gatos needs to research in order to put this ordinance in place, that any new store could be in violation of that proposed regulatory scheme. And for all of those reasons, my motion would be for this council to accept the 10-day report and to adopt the extension of the urgency ordinance that we have before us.
All right, we have a motion. Before I look to see if there's a second, I will ask staff if that motion encompasses what it's looking for.
The one other item we would wonder if it's included in the motion is item 4 of the recommendation, which is to waive the reading of the full urgency ordinance, and
yes.
If that's included in the motion.
I'm sorry, thank you, yes.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Jensen, seconded by Mr. Przynski. At this point, we can have council discussion. Does anyone want any input? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. As you know, this is a difficult subject. Last time we adopted the ordinance, I agreed very much with the mayor's comments that we need to take a breath, and we took a 45-day breath from this topic. In some respects, all of us have it on our mind, but nevertheless, the 45 days wasn't really enough time to get much done. Coming forward, we may not need 10 months. It sounds like it's going to be agendized in June before our council recess. I'm looking forward to that because I think the community needs to be at peace with this, as some of the speakers suggested. I think, as Councilwoman Jensen mentioned, there was a gun sold to an individual and it had to be returned that did not, should not have been in possession of that gun. And there's, greater responsibilities we have as council people up here on this dais to represent this community and the general welfare of the public. So someone mentioned pride about Los Gatos. Do we want to be known for certain things or other things? I think one thing we can agree on is that we take the appropriate steps to support the general welfare and the people, regardless of our as well as our Second Amendment rights, taking that into consideration. There's a lot of different point of views on this, but we did receive a credible threat to our town government a year ago from that very same individual who bought that gun. So as we look at this emergency ordinance moving forward, I'm looking forward to what the ad hoc committee can do. I'm looking forward to us having some more time to hit the pause button and get some measures in place that can ensure that we can move forward, being able to protect the general welfare of the community from potential issues that may come about, at the same time preserve everyone's rights. So that's how I'm going to comment. I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. And I will also be supporting the motion. There were several of you who spoke and had anticipated that the motion would be supported by the council. And just, I once again want to commend those of you who spoke, no matter which side of the issue upon which you spoke. You were courteous, articulate, and even though I narrowed, or the staff issue narrowed the issue, and sometimes it's very hard to gauge your comments to a narrowed issue, again, on both sides, you once again did it. And I'm going to echo what the Vice Mayor said and what those of you in the audience have said. It's time for us to address this issue, to heal, and to move on. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. So I will ask staff, anything else you need on this?
Not at this time.
All right, the meeting's adjourned.